Hello and welcome back to another coding session with Mr. Jacob. This is the first in a series of videos where we will install and configure Neovim from scratch to have a, for us, productively usable IDE for all of our coding needs. So let's get right into it. In order to install it, we are just using the package manager of our choice. As I am on macOS here, I would simply use Homebrew for that. So I just issue the command brew install Neovim. And as you could have imagined, it is already installed because I'm usually using it during all of our other videos. However, usually this would now install and set up Neovim on your system. After that, you have the nvim executable, which you can just call then, and have your Neovim started up. And this is actually how it looks if there is no configuration at all. I have moved my configuration over, or at least I have used a new and empty configuration using a simple trick here where we simply export a certain environment variable called nvim app name to force it into another to look into another directory when loading its configuration. So actually it is now looking not into .config.nvim, but it is looking into .config.nvim from scratch. And as you can see, we only have a README in here. If you are on another system, like for example a Linux or any other system that you might have there, and a BSD or something like that, please consult the package manager of your choice to install Neovim. Okay, so let's take a look at our README, because our README kind of structures how and what we will be going to install in which order. So as we can see here now, unfortunately, we don't have any syntax highlighting and stuff, and we will need to get that going there and install that, and we will do that in the coming videos here and the coming minutes of this video. So essentially, that's our plan. That is everything that I could currently think of that we want to configure and install in this order, and I will talk about it and explain to you what it is. And that we may, during this video series, change this plan a little, maybe move objects around or do that or add something there if we are encountering something that we should have installed. So let's kind of start with lazy.nvim. Because we will need a lot of different plugins and a lot of different configuration things there that we need to go and need to do. And therefore, we need some sort of package manager of choice for Neovim. And there are a couple of different package managers, and one of those is called lazy.nvim. Lazy.nvim, please do not confuse that with lazy.nvim, which is essentially, I can open that up as well, which is a fully blown pre-configured kind of set of options and plugins and things that the author likes to use like that and provide you as a quite fully fledged IDE starting point, but that's beyond the point. We want to roll all of that on our own here in order to better understand what we are doing and to actually have exactly it to our likings. So we are using lazy.nvim, not lazy.nvim. Lazy.nvim is actually using lazy.nvim, but we are using lazy.nvim. So let's get back to lazy.nvim, as you can see here, which is simply a package manager which allows lazy loading of plugins, and it's my choice of package manager. So let's quickly here see how we can actually install that. There is this help which tells us, okay, please create under your configuration directory an init.lua and put that config.lazy in there. And then create this lua config lazy lua here. So essentially, we are requiring that file here, so to speak, tell the system, go into the config directory and load the lazy.lua file there. And then we are putting that lazy lua here, which actually has all of this initialization code here. And we will take a look at some of those options here within that code, but most of it is just simply the setup code that we need to actually lazy or to actually initialize this package manager. So let's go ahead and quickly just do as we are told. So we are creating here a configuration directory, and we are first creating a Lua directory, and then a configuration directory within this Lua directory, so that actually now this looks like that. And this is actually important, even though we have on the top level of it this init Lua file in a second. So we will have this init Lua file here. on the top level. Everything else that is Lua will be needed to be beyond this Lua folder here. Because actually in Neovim we have two different ways of executing and configuring plugins and scripts, which is first of all Vim script, which is what was used in the old Vim system, and Lua, which is now the scripting language of choice within Neovim. So it still understands and correctly executes Vim script, and we will even use that to install an older plugin which doesn't have Lua there. But if you have something that is a Lua system here, you always need to put it under the Lua folder. So yeah, let's quickly do that. Let's Lua config, and it should be called lazy Lua. So let's do that. Let's put, I think I just overwrote my copy buffer. So let's quickly copy that again here. And let's go here and let's put that here. Okay, now we have our lazy.nvim file here, and there are actually some things that we might need, that we might want to change. So this is essentially, as the comment says, just bootstrapping our lazy package manager thing, and we will not touch that. However, we are defining something that is the map leader and map local leader. We will need that later on for key mappings. And I think we will get back to it once we really need that, because I, for my part, usually change that leader key. So the leader key is actually a special key in Neovim or in Vim in general that you can configure to use it as your own key map start, so that you can do something like, as it is configured here, which most people do, use space. So you can do some shortcuts. For example, my usual shortcut for formatting code is leader CF for simple code format. And so you have a whole bunch of keys that you know that Vim does not kind of define on its own. So that's why you have this leader key. And the leader is a special key which can be used in key mappings then as a shortcut kind of, where you really specify leader, and then you have one place where you can configure that. And as certain plugins, while they are loading, need this leader to be defined, you define it here before actually making lazy load all plugins. And that's essentially what is kind of interesting here, that we have here the import plugins command here, which essentially goes ahead and will instruct lazy.nvim to load every file under the plugins directory and parse it as if it is a lazy plugin specification. We will get to that in a second, what that actually means. So if I write that now and I go into our init.lua and I do there the requested require config.lazy, save that, and now simply restart nvim, it will tell us that it does not find any specs for the module plugins. That's because we have not created any plugin spec there. So nothing really happens there now. But let's see what actually happens if we install our first plugin there. So let's see. We wanted lazy.nvim. Yeah, we kind of did that. We haven't seen it yet in action because we need that plugin folder. Our first plugin will actually be another color scheme, because the default color schemes in Vim are not very full-blown, and I really don't like them. They are quite minimalistic based on the shell colors that are there, and they are not very compatible with something else that we will be using later. Treesitter, there are better out there. And for this series, I will use the kanagawa.nvim theme, even though that's not the one that I'm using. I'm actually using a modified version of Groovebox. But I always liked the Kanagawa theme, and so why not play with that in this series? So let's see how we can actually install it. Let's go back here. Let's quickly open that up and let's just say kanagawa.nvim. And we should get a neat little link to a plugin here, which is called kanagawa.nvim. So essentially, as this thing is really optimized, and as you can see, it comes with different even darkness and lightness versions and so on and so on. It is actually quite sophisticated, as it even compiles its theming options into into kind of a bytecode that is then read, which makes it faster to start up and all of that. We don't really need to think about that. But as you can see, you have a lot of different options that you might even want to change here or to even configure there. And you can actually do that. But now let's take a look here. Here should be something somewhere which we might have scrolled over again. Usage, installation. So it tells us, use kind of this here. So now let's take a look how we actually install something like this via lazy.nvim. So let's go back to our lazy documentation and let's go into the plugin spec. And there are a lot of different options how you define a plugin with lazy.nvim. But let's scroll down a little bit where we now found this example. And let's kind of talk about that using the bad example, because it is a better example to explain how this is structured. Every of these plugins is a Lua table. A Lua table is kind of a mixture of a hash map and an array. So you can either have kind of array entries only, which is this here. It's just an entry in the table, which is then numerically indexable. And you can have key value pairs, like this, for example, where we have the key config, which is then assigned a function. In Lua, functions are first level citizens, so we can simply use them as an expression to assign them to a variable or to a key within a table and so on. And as you can see, there are a lot of different keys that we can actually use in this table struct to define things in this plugin, and even more if we want to do lazy loading, which we will use in a later stage. But the first thing every of this plugin definitions is always this kind of GitHub syntax where to find the data of the plugin to actually install it before it is even sourced. And then we have those keys. And usually the basic structure of most of all Neovim plugins, because that is essentially the way that it is supposed to be defined, and most plugins are adhering to this, is that every plugin actually exposes on its kind of plugin scope, so to speak, so after it is loaded, a setup function. And this setup function needs to be called as an entry point to initialize the plugin once it should be loaded. And it is given then another table, which is actually a couple of options to the plugin that you might want to supply there to override certain configuration options of this plugin. And and as this is actually the case, as you are kind of after installing the plugin source somewhere, you are always loading it up. So to speak, having the Lua interpreter load the file, parse it, and provide you back with this structure, which is in turn a Lua table as well, but that's not that important right now, with a setup function on it that you can then call to actually execute the code of the plugin. And as this is more or less the standard for all plugins, lazy.nvim has a shortcut for that, which is simply opt. So you are kind of supplying the options which go into the setup function separately here, which in turn is a good thing because it can be evaluated at another stage. Lazy.nvim can then do some more intelligent evaluation of all of that. So this is the encouraged way if you don't need to call something else besides the setup function. There are some plugins where you might need to do that. Then you can simply override this config function and then simply call that yourself. But usually you do it like that. So let's do it like that. We wanted to install the Kanagawa theme. So let's create our plugins directory here, which we didn't have until now. And now let's maybe just create a Kanagawa Lua file here. And yeah, we still don't have plugins, so that is all right. So now we need to return such a plugin configuration. In all of our plugin files, we need to return the plugin configuration there that we actually want to give out. So that is essentially what we do here. And I hope I still have that in my clipboard. Yes, I have. So I'm just doing that. And I'm specifying empty options here. And don't really think about that this looks not really nicely formatted or anything like that yet. We will fix that later on automatically by using formatter here. So we don't really care about formatting now. So we simply tell lazy.nvim, please get this here for us, and then, yeah, initialize it kind of with an empty default options array. And as the plugin here itself said, okay, configuration, there is no need to call setup if you are okay with the defaults. So yeah, we don't really need to do that. We don't even really need to, I think, call that. Maybe we don't even need to call setup at all, but I think it will not be a problem there. So now let's restart nvim, and no specs found for modular plugin. Okay, so I did something wrong here. Maybe I put it, yes. Let's see. I put my plugins folder. As I've told you in the beginning, you need to put everything Lua under the Lua folder, and I did not. So it couldn't find it there. So let's move the plugins folder into our Lua folder. And now let's just call nvim on Lua plugins Kanagawa again. And now we see that here now the lazy.nvim spins into action. So this is actually lazy.nvim, which now actually installed our Kanagawa plugin and started it, and everything is neat and fine. And so we can get out of that and restart that. And now we actually need to somehow specify color scheme Kanagawa. And now we should actually have the Kanagawa color scheme here. So, and as you can see, it already looks a lot nicer. It, for example, has this nice start and end braces highlighting, or it just looks nicer there overall, I think. So how do we actually make it kind of always use this color theme? So let's take a look at the configuration to find out just that. So maybe we need some options here after all. So let's see. So let's scroll down there, and there is setup must be called before loading. Okay, so must be called before loading is kind of interesting actually, because oh no, the setup function must be called before loading the theme. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So maybe there is still a reason why we need or want our config function here, because then we can do this, just call the setup function, and then we can actually set the color theme. So yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and simply use that here. So now we are just replacing this, as we have seen before, with config, which is then a function here, and functions in Lua end with an end there. So we have now an anonymous function there, and as I've said, don't think too much about the formatting here. So what we do here now is we require Kanagawa. And we do a setup call on that. And as we have learned, we can actually have this theme compiled, enabling compiling color schemes. So maybe we should enable that, because it makes things a little faster. So let's do that. Actually never tried that, but why not? So we simply set that to true. And then we actually have this thing set up and required. And then we need vim-cmd, and we simply call color scheme Kanagawa. And now actually we should have that here. And there was something that during reading, there was something like, if you enable compilation, make sure to run Kanagawa compile command every time you make changes to your config. And this is actually kind of interesting, because we can actually tell lazy.nvim to do something like that for us. So let's quickly take a look at this plugin spec again. And there is something where we can define dependencies, enabled, condition, priority, init, opts, config, main, build. Build is executed when the plugin is installed or updated. So that is essentially, I guess, more or less the situation when we definitely want to do Kanagawa compile. So, and we might need to do it if we really change an option there. So let's do that. Let's define that define that build thingy here. So we simply specify that we have another entry in this table, which is called build, and it is a function as well. And it will end somewhere. And it will simply do a require, or no, we don't even need to do that. We have this as a command. So vim-cmd, what was it? It was it kanagawa? Let's quickly check how this was. Actually, no, this is the wrong file there. Let's see how we actually need to do that. Kanagawa compile. So let's do here kanagawa compile. So let's save that and let's go back into the plugin and let's do one manually here, kanagawa compile then. And it seems it successfully compiled. And as you already see, this change that we did here actually worked. So because if I'm now opening up this here, it is perfectly and nicely displaying our Kanagawa theme here. So the thing that we could now do is we could actually use that theme here as well in the Lua configuration, because this will be used when installing plugins, and I essentially want to use the same color scheme when installing plugins than I am using for my editor anyways. So let's quickly change that. Okay, so I think we can now cross off 2 things from our list. And as you can see now, just by installing the color scheme, I already have a little bit better and more nicely color scheme here for actually working with Markdown. Unfortunately, what is not so nice, I'm just seeing that, is that in my current theme here, I can't really seem to see highlights very good. So that's a problem. And furthermore, our transparent terminal background seems to have gone. So I think we have to take a look at that. Nevertheless, our lazy and Kanagawa, maybe not cross that off yet. Our lazy.nvim seems to work as it installed this plugin fine. So let's see what we can do about this transparency and maybe highlight issues there. So there are different color schemes here that we can actually choose from. Maybe we should try out this dragon. Nevertheless, I actually kind of like it. So the question is, do we have some sort of transparency thing here? So compile, curl, something, keyword style, type style, transparent. Do not set the background color. Nice. That's kind of what we need. That's kind of exactly what we need. So let's maybe set transparent to true and let's see what then happens. So by the way, if you are wondering when I'm of a reflex from older and times before, I'm always typing or often typing VI or Vim still. So I actually have in my terminal an alias for actually Vim as well as VI to just call into my nvim. So just if you are wondering, so usually you would have this nvim here. So if I now go into plugins, Kanagawa again, so let's go there. And I simply tell it here that I do not only want to compile it, but I want it to be transparent true as well. Then it told us that we need to do Kanagawa compile. And now, nicely done, just as we did that, it already resourced the configuration, and we can now see that the background is transparent. And now we can see this markings a little bit better. We might need to configure the colors a little bit different there. Nevertheless, that's kind of nice. Maybe we will take a look at this dragon thing. Why not? Let's quickly do that. Theme dragon, or what was it? So let's quickly do theme equals dragon, and let's see actually how this will look. Let's do a Kanagawa compile here again. And maybe I think we need to reload Kanagawa compile. So it kind of looks the same to me. Not really a difference there. So was it really? Oh, it was it colors? No, it was just theme. Load wave theme when background option is not set. Okay, I see. So Yeah, maybe we will just stay with the default for now and don't play with that. So Kanagawa compile. So perfectly. Okay, so we now have our theme here crossed off our list. We have transparency working there. So let's go into our README here and let's cross that from our list. The next thing that we need to talk about quickly, because that is really quickly done, is I usually don't like the default status bar here down there, even though it is okayish and it displays the most important things, like for example the line number here or where we are in the document, as well as the document name and stuff like that. It can be a lot nicer, and I am actually using a quite heavily configured Lua Statusline Lua, I think it is called. However, there is a really nice out-of-the-box status line out there, which we can quite easily use, and I want to actually tell you about the mini collection of plugins anyways. So there is this thing called mini status line, and it is part of a collection of plugins called mini-nvim. And if you go here to mini-nvim, you will see that there is a really lot amount of modules, and we will even in the end use a couple of them, I think. So something like, for example, the mini AI is something that I'm mostly using. It is just allowing you to have more Vim motion commands, which are quite nice. We have something like, for example, the auto pass command or the commenting. We have snippets and so on and so on. Surround is something that I'm thinking I'm using as well. And as you can see, there are a lot of different plugins that you can just go through and see if you need any of them, if they make your life easier, your development life. And essentially, there is the rule of thumb that if you're unsure, just try it. And if you detect that you are not using a certain plugin at all, then delete it anyways again. Every Neovim setup of every developer that I've met has a couple of basic plugins running, which are mostly the same, which is kind of what I'm telling you, even though this is now quite opinionated, what I'm going to install here. And the rest is completely custom and user-defined. So just go through that, and if you see something that you like, just use it. So let's go back to mini status line, and we can either install all of those mini plugins or we can install them actually one by one, and we will install them one by one. So let's see here, installation, there it is. Okay, lazy.nvim, perfect. It's already there, and it has already the correct lines here that we need. So we are just copying those because we want the oh no, I think we want do we want to live on the edge and take it from the main? I think I usually take it from the main branch actually. So, yeah, but we can change that easily later on if we want to. So we are simply using that file here. And then we are going back to our terminal and we are going into Lua, plugins, and maybe we could do something like mini, for example, there. But in this case, I think I will call this statusline.lua because we might later on change our mind and install something which is then the Lua status line, for example. So we are just creating again, and I don't need that actually because I copied that. So let's put that in there, like what we need here, what we copied from the website. So let's quickly start that again. And what did we do there? I think there is a comma which shouldn't be there. Let's remove that. Let's start that again. And now we see that actually our neat little lazy.nvim here goes ahead and installs the status lines. So let's restart, and it is not being spawned. So did we miss something? I think we did not call setup, didn't we? So yeah, don't forget to call setup, as I have explained before. So, but we don't want to call the setup function manually because, as we have learned, we can simply use the opts equal and then just put no further options in there here. And now, as you can see, we already have a much nicer status line, which tells us about our current mode that we are in, if we are in normal mode or if we are in insert mode, and what kind of file we are editing, including the path, which is quite nice, the file type that's there. We have a column display, which I really much like. I really much like to have to see not only in which column I am, but how many columns there are actually in a line. So as you can see, if I now here do this and do 10 spaces, I can see this line actually has 10 indentation spaces in it, which I really like to see in the status line, because there are situations where you really want and need to see something like that. And I'm not even sure, maybe this is this n is always just an n, but I would assume that if I make this, as you can see, smaller, it even starts to show you more stuff. So it is the same thing as with the Lua line that I built for myself. It will actually show you more if there is more space. So now you can see the mode written out there. You see which kind of formatting line endings this is and how big it is and stuff like that. The path is bigger. It's not that short. So now it's a full path, and here it's only a relative path. And actually, that is really nice. So with only with just this simple line here, we actually created and used this neat little status line. So I think we can go ahead and mark this as finished as well. Okay, so now the next thing in our list is oil.nvim. And oil.nvim is actually something, as you might have by now realized, I'm going in and out of this Vim structure here, of my Neovim here, because I actually always want to change the file, and that is something that we will later on do using in this setup using either Telescope, or in our case we will use FZF Lua, because I like that better, but that's a personal opinion again. Or you could do this by simply using the file browser. So there is a file browser within Neovim. It is actually netrw. It is the file browser that has been kind of there since I can think, since I used Vim back in the day. However, I never can remember the shortcuts. Even though they are presented here to me, I never can remember those shortcuts. So I actually don't like this thing very much. And there is one thing that I really like and really use in Neovim if I'm not already jumping around between existing files, but need to change the structure of a directory tree, or need to create new things or move things around or stuff like that. And that's oil.nvim. And oil.nvim actually has quite little nifty features. It is essentially showing you, such as with the netrw, it is showing you the buffer that you actually can then navigate around in, as you can see here. But you can actually then really edit this buffer. You simply rename files by renaming the text in the buffer. You move them by moving them around in the buffer. You can delete them by simply deleting the line of the file in the buffer. And when you write this, so if you save the buffer, then it will actually realize all of those changes on your file system. And we will see in a second how this works. Let's go down here to installation again, lazy.nvim. And as you can see, this is a little bit more involved than what we had before. First of all, it tells us again, or tells the system again, from where to install it. Then we have something that might be of interest later on once we installed LSPs, which tells it actually where to find the typings for what is in here, so that it can actually help us using auto-completion and maybe syntax checking and semantics checking if we have the right options and stuff like that. Then it is actually installing a dependency, which in this case is mini.icons, which is really nice. We already learned about the mini things of plugins here. It might even install another one, which is nvim webdev icons. I usually go with this, I think. And then we tell the lazy loading facilities of nvim that we don't want to lazy load it, because essentially we need to load it up front in order to use it as a default file chooser. So it will replace our netrw. So let's do Lua plugins And let's just do oil.lua here. And let's do a return and put the copied code in there. And that's essentially everything that we need to do. We will configure that a little bit in a second. But if I now rerun my VI, it should have installed it. Did I do something wrong there? So what did I miss here, actually? So can I now do... Okay, it already installed it? Why is it already installed? Okay, I have no idea why this is already installed, but nicely done. Maybe it took it from some cache or something because I have it in my other NVim configuration as well. I have no idea, but it is now installed and we can actually use it by calling up the oil function. So we can either do oil, then we get this here, and now I can, for example, go to the oil here and press enter, and it will simply go into that file. Or I can even give this oil function, which I usually like to do, options like, for example, float. And if I do that, it will simply open up a floating window above our other buffers just to show you that it is just navigating around somewhere. And if I go, for example, now into this Kanagawa file, I'm in this Kanagawa file. However, I don't want to always type oil -- float somewhere. I just want to press minus, because minus is actually the base key within oil.js. It is the same in netrw actually, to go up one directory. So this is the way that I can now wander around this file tree here by pressing minus and navigating around here. And I actually want to be able to enter this the parent directory of the currently edited file, which is only reasonable if you think about the key mappings there, pressing this minus as well. So that is something that I want to configure. So let me open up my oil here. And let's create another config file here, which I can now simply do by simply hitting the insert mode in this buffer, which is quite nice. And we are going just ahead there and now inserting into this thing something that we call keymaps or keymap.lua, for example. Then I press escape, then I save that thing and it asks me, do you want to create that? And I simply say yes. And now I have a file like that. And now I may realize that, I don't want to name this keymap, but keymaps. So I simply go into insert mode again, I change that, I save that, and it automatically wants to rename this thing. So that is actually how you can now interact with files, by simply editing them like they are an edit buffer in your VI, which is just... that's just really, really fun. And this is really great. I really like that. So, now that we have this keymaps file, let's create a quick keymap there, which we can do by, I think, vi keymap.add, or is it keymaps.add? I'm never 100% sure. And we want that to be in normal mode. We want to map the minus key, and we want to map the minus key actually to a command. In this case, we want to map it to oil -- float, and then we want the system to press enter. That's actually the way to do that. And we will be using which key later, which can show us our key bindings and stuff like that. And for that to actually work, we give it a description here, which is actually optional, but usually I'm being a good Neovim citizen and giving all of my key bindings a description. So we can just do open parent directory in oil. Okay, so let's do that, let's save that. And now we need to go back to oil again, and we need to go into our init.lua file or into our config lazy.lua file to include that keymaps file, because until now it is not loaded. And I'm usually doing that in lazy because then I can do it at the right moment. I can ensure that it is really done after my setup to lazy is called, because we will have some options that we want to set later on that we want to set before loading all of the plugins. So we will later on have something here at this position, but now we have something down here at this position. So let's do that. Let's tell the system that we want to require config.keymaps, we called it, didn't we? So it should load now our keymaps here. And if we simply save that and go back into that, it will tell us that there is something wrong here. So what did I do wrong there? Attempt to index field keymaps in a nil value. So it seems to me that it can't, in our key values file, so that I did something wrong here. And that's actually kind of strange because vim should at least be defined. So let me quickly see how what I did wrong here. So let's do an help keymaps or help keymap. So actually the VI documentation is normally quite good, even though this does seem to be not what I wanted to search for. So let's go out of here again. And let's maybe quickly take a peek at my configuration before we now here kind of Google ourselves to death, because I just can't remember how to do that. Yeah. Okay, so vim keymap, it is just vim keymap, and then it is set and not add. Okay. So yeah, let's go back into our oil here. Let's go one level up. Let's go into config keymap, and it is keymap, and it is set. And I can really never remember. So if I now do that again, it should load perfect. And if I now press minus, great. Awesome. Now we have this mapped on the minus key, and I can use it to move around in the file system. So I can easily go, for example, now to the README file here and change that to it is now completed. So the last thing that I now want to do with you, or maybe not the last thing, but the one before the last thing here, maybe we'll do vim-sleuth as well. Yeah, I guess we will, is setting some basic options. So even though we already have a quite usable VI setup now, as you can see, we still have not covered all of the neat stuff like language servers and Treesitter and stuff. But we need some basic options here. I want, for example, something like I want line numbers to the left, and I want some specific indentation configuration, because as you might have seen or realized already, this here is not the perfect indentation configuration, at least not to my liking. So it is here we are currently using tabs, and we are using a tab width of 8, and I don't I don't really like that. It's too much, and it's not my way of configuring it. So we will want to do some basic options and set some basic options there. So let's go ahead and do that. And I will show you two different ways to get a sensible list of proper options. So we are just creating an options Lua file here. So let's save that. Let's go into that, and let's now, not let's get into that, but let's get into lazy. And now we source that, and we source that actually before loading our plugins, because there might be some options that we set that a plugin then changes its behavior based on that. So I usually source this settings. Actually, as I'm now reading, as this comment here says as well, I'm doing that just at this position. So I'm going there and telling it to config option to load config options here. Perfect. So now it should actually source that file, and we can go again to our file here and change a couple of options. So what I will do in a second is I will simply take my options file that I have in my Vim configuration that I have done for myself, and where I set the configuration to my liking, and we will go through all of these major options and copy parts out of them, the basic ones, out into this file. However, if you don't have such a configuration or options file and you want to start from scratch, and that is essentially what I'm showing you here, a very good starting place is kickstart.nvim. So if we go to kickstart.nvim, if we search for that, we are actually within the kickstart.nvim repository here on GitHub. And kickstart.nvim actually has this init Lua file there, which is more or less a minimal from scratch Neovim configuration, which is already quite usable. And you can actually orient yourself when you're creating your own very good based on this thing. It's essentially using lazy.nvim as well. And it has, if you are just starting to take a look here, a lot of different options that you actually can set that makes very much sense, and they are commented nicely to tell you what they actually do. For example, make line numbers default, and so on and so on. With another option below, you can have relative line numbers if you want, so then you have to set this. Or if you want to enable mouse mode, or if you want to actually show the mode in the status line, yes or no, you can set that there. And it's all those neat little options that you might want to configure to your likings, which are really goodly explained there. And that is a really, really nice starting point for your configuration. However, I will go ahead and not use those now, but I will use my own as a starting point because it makes just a little bit more sense for me to do that here when rolling this configuration, because I already have them on my system. So let's quickly see if we can't split our buffers here and go to the, what would it be, NVim, my real NVim folder, and there should be a Lua one, and I am structuring my files a little bit differently than I have shown you here. By now I would change that to the way that we have done here, but when I did that, I didn't know it better. So yeah, so I have this options file here as well. And as you can see, I actually have a couple of comments and stuff more or less stolen out of Kickstarter as well, because that is essentially how I started creating that. Those first options here, those lang map and those key mappings here, those don't need to, those are not very relevant for you. They are really relevant for me because I'm remapping my keyboard keys to better access the closed and open square brackets, because I have a German keyboard and I'm not using an English keyboard layout, but I want to access those characters in normal mode at the same position, kind of, because Neovim makes very much it makes very much use of the square brackets to jump around in, for example, arrows or brackets or every kind of stuff. It's always the kind of forward-backward navigation key, so I need them at special positions. And those beginning here just does that. So essentially what we have then here next, which is the most important thing that we need to do first, it is this kind of block here, which I will just take out there and copy it over here, and then we will talk about it a little. Essentially what I want to do is I don't want to use tabs, I want to use spaces. Or let's talk on this side about it, because you might not see the other one very nicely. So I want to use spaces instead of tabs. My usual shift width is 4. So I usually want one tab indentation level to be 4 spaces. And of course we can discuss about that. There might be different coding styles in different languages where you want to change that. And we will take care of that in a second, but my default configuration usually is 4, because I think that is a reasonable default. If you think different, just change it. That's why we are rolling a configuration from scratch and for your own, so that you can actually configure that to your liking. Tab stop essentially is the same thing. So per tab that you do, actually how many should be shown. Usually you want your shift width, your tab stop, and your soft tab stop the same, to be the same. You can actually configure that differently, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense in the most situations. So then we want to do smart tabbing, which means that the system automatically will not have you like delete every space separately, but detect that you can now go back one indentation level and for example, delete 4 at once and so on. Smart indent is more or less the same thing, but in the other way. Like, for example, if I press enter, it just indent correctly. And auto indent is essentially what's written there, keep indentation from the previous line. So we now should have configuration there to do a little bit better indenting and not have those 8 spaces as a real tab there. Then I actually have the configuration here, which I copy over, which actually makes use of showing line numbers so that I see line numbers. Furthermore, I want actually a cursor line. So the line under my cursor, as you currently see, is just transparent as well. But I like it to be not transparent, but to actually show me the line in a specific color. So then I want undo files, which is quite important option for me. I want the system to actually, or Neovim, to actually store my undo history across editing sessions. So if I go back to a file later on, so I do something, I go out of Neovim, I execute something, I go back into Neovim, and I want to undo the change that I just did there, I can just press the U key and it will simply undo, because it has stored an undo file for that specific file, and it has the undo history therefore preserved not only in memory but on my disk, and therefore can undo changes, or I can look at even the complete undo tree. We will get to that maybe later. We can actually take a look at that and change that even after or between different editing sessions. Mouse mode might be interesting. I usually enable it because there are not very much backsides for me. Yeah, I don't show the mode since it's already in the status line. That is actually something that you can see here now. If I, for example, go to visual mode, it shows me here in the command line down here. It shows me again the mode as well, and that is something that I don't want, because now as we installed mini.statusline, we actually have that mode here. So as you can see, if I now go into visual line mode, it tells me VL there, or even if I made the screen smaller, the font smaller, it would actually zoom out there and tell me visual line. So I actually want to get that over here as well. So let's put that there. And yeah, let's go back here. We want break indent, which essentially is another feature which should actually not be there down there, but it should actually be somewhere here, which kind of helps us with if an indentation goes beyond or if a line goes beyond the screen space there. That's how it's actually rendered then when it's broke down to the next line there. Then I want to usually do in searches, I want ignore and smart case, which is quite nice, because essentially what this means is that I search for something, that it will actually search for that in a way that is, if I'm only typing lower space characters, it will actually search for any kind of character case combination for this search. But if I start typing only one capsed character within this string, it will assume that I want to really search for casing combinations and then switch back to a real match, which is really nice because it kind of automatically does most of the time what you want. Keep the sign column on by default is an option. We haven't seen that yet, but we will, once we installed language servers, have another column on the left side which can show us something like there is a warning, there is an error, there is something that I want to highlight to you, which shows an icon kind of, for example, where you can look. And this sign column usually only appears when there is something in it. But I want to have it appear everywhere, every time, because I don't like it if my line numbers and my gutter is jumping around if this situation changes. So if I have cleaned up a file and there are no errors in it, and suddenly I write a line and some error appears again, it's indenting everything to the right, and I don't like that. So I'm kind of always showing that, and not actually, even though if it's empty, kind of. So yeah, we can kind of decrease our update time. I won't do that now here. That is something that I usually use by default, as you have, for example, seen here is, by default, if I do a V-split or a split in general, it will always be on the left side, because that's the left thing where I V-split it. And it then moved my content to the right and split it, opened the new thing to the left. And actually, I don't like that. And it's the same with horizontal splits, where it does it on the top. And I actually want it exactly the other way around. If I do a new split, I want to have to make it appear on the right. And I want, if I do a new horizontal split, I want to appear it on the bottom. So that is what we can actually configure here. So that is essentially then what we do here, and I have somehow not yanked that. So let me yank that. So okay. So yeah, so now I want to actually display in a neat little way something like new lines. I want trailing spaces, and I want real tab characters to be displayed, to be visible. And that is essentially what I can display here. I can say that tab characters, for example, should get a slightly darker version of this one. Trailing spaces should get this dot, and non-breaking spaces, for example, should get this this sign there. And I don't show new lines. Before I actually showed new lines, but I don't do that anymore. But that's actually, if you are interested in that, just take a look at the help of list charts, and you will get a lot more options that you can set there to show the non-visible characters in a way. Then we have this scroll off. It's essentially doing what is written there, minimal number of screen lines to keep above and below the cursor. So the system will automatically take care of that. If we are doing something that I'm doing here, for example, that I'm scrolling around here, it would now actually always scroll down already, so to give me a little bit better context window to actually take a look at. Command height is something that we can use, but I think we won't use for this setup here. It's essentially eliminating this command line down here, giving us one more line actually to work with in our buffers, and kind of overriding our status line once we actually enter command mode. However, while we are working on our plugins, I will not enable this, I think, because this is the line where we might see some kind of errors or stuff like that when something happens there, and it might not really be visible otherwise. So just in order to make things neat. And this is a neat little function that I will not put in there as well. You can take a look at that yourself. It is will be linked in the video description as well. A link to my real .files repository with my configuration. It does exactly what it is, what this is described here. After you have yanked something, it will kind of do a specific highlight, which can be quite nice. Not if you do this by visual mode and select it, then you know what you did. But if I, for example, do something like I want to yank this this bracket here, so I would do something like that, and now I have yanked all of the contents within this bracket here, but I have not seen that. And this function actually takes care of that and makes that position of the yanked the yanked context there then kind of highlight for a second, so that I see that I really yanked the right stuff. But yeah, I think we are now kind of ready with the default configuration. So let's save that, let's quit that, and let's quickly go back here. And now, as you can see, we have relative line numbers. We have a cursor line, which is now a little bit nicer to see there. We have, let's go back to our options here, and let's see. You can see that when I'm scrolling around, it's actually adhering to this. Please keep it in the corresponding range here, which might not be that good for this kind of zoom level. So maybe let's change that to down to 5 here. Yes, which kind of makes things a little bit more reasonable. So now we can actually scroll around. Nevertheless, that is actually a nice thing to have. And now actually, if I go back to, where was this plugin? Was it Kanagawa? Now we can actually see that we have real tabs here. This is essentially this character that I told the system to display me if I have really a tab here. Nevertheless, you can see that those are not rendered with 8 spaces anymore, but with 4, which is a little bit more reasonable. And I could, for example, do something like retab now, and it should convert all of them to spaces. Now we have spaces there actually, but I won't do that now because I want to format this whole file later on in a little bit different way. I could do here now oh no, those are not trailing spaces. If I would do trailing spaces here, you can see that those are displayed as well directly because of our configuration, which is quite nice. And we have overall a more reasonable and more nice to work with Vim configuration there. But now we have this tabbing thingy here. So the problem here is the following. If I now do something like I want to insert something here, for example, I want to do the foobar option here equals true. Then you can already see the problem. Vim has now inserted, according to our configuration here, spaces instead of tabs. But that's a problem. What if our project there actually uses tabs? Or if it uses two spaces instead of 4? So that's kind of bad, and we actually would like to have our Neovim setup to automatically detect that. And that is where we actually get, okay, let me cross out basic options into vim-sleuth, which is actually a really neat plugin, which has been around there since I can think of Vim. So vim-sleuth, it is actually a Vim script plugin, and I actually don't know, I've never really taken a look, but I think that there isn't a Lua variant of it. Maybe there is another way today to do this in Neovim, but I have used this sleuth Vim forever, kind of. And we actually can use this as well. It is, even though it is a normal Vim plugin, we simply can load that via lazy, and then tell lazy to simply do kind of do nothing to initialize it, because just loading it will already make it run properly. So let's actually steal that again from my nvim repository here. So we have Lua, we have there Mr. Jacob, we have their plugins, and we have their vim-sleuth Lua. And that's essentially everything that we need here. So let's copy that out there, and let's vim Lua plugins vim, or let's call it sleuth.vim. I've just seen in the sleuth vim.lua in the repository that it's actually called like that. Let's put that there, and let's actually save that. And now let's edit that again, and it will be installed. Let's go out, let's start. So now it should actually have configured our tab configuration according to what it auto detects in this file. So if I now, and you can see that now, if I now create a new line here, it will have automatically switched to tabs instead of spaces, because it automatically detected this configuration. And we can, of course, do something like, if you now go back to our, what was it, Kanagawa thingy here, and now we actually, if I now do this, you can see that it actually used the tabs here. And if I indent here, it will use tabs instead of spaces. So it automatically read that from the file. And that's actually the most efficient and nice way I can think of, and I reasonably use to always kind of automatically have the right configuration. Sure thing, you can do something like editor.conf and stuff like that with an editor.conf file, and there is a plugin for that as well that we might actually even take into consideration. So I will just add that here at the end. I will need to take a look at where we actually put that, but I have not thought about actually showing you that. But we would like to have that work exactly. And now I can mark this, mark this off here as finished as well. But as you can see now, we have a quite nice and neat Neovim configuration already, which is a really good starting point to now go ahead and do the further stuff like Treesitter and language server support and stuff like that. And FZF Lua for that matter. And yeah, I think that will be then in the second video of this series, as I think this is a really nice starting point here for where to actually start. And now you have from scratch a new Neovim configuration, which is already quite usable and quite nice for basic tasks. And in the next session then we will take a look at how to actually configure that and how to actually get that running to actually support you during coding and development with all the neat little bells and whistles that you are actually knowing from your other full-blown graphical IDEs. Yeah, I hope you had fun and you learned something about how you can start up configuring Neovim, and you will join me in the next session when I then go ahead and do the further configuration from scratch of Neovim. So I hope you liked this video, so please give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment if you have any questions, or if you just want to tell me that you like this kind of content, or what you want there, or if you have any ideas or other plugins that you want me to take a look at, please comment that as well. I always welcome any kind of interaction from you, so please do that. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the bell to be informed when the next video is out. And as always, I hope you had fun, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!